All right, well, welcome back. We're going to talk about OARS through the next series of videos. OARS stands for Open-Ended Questions, Affirmations, Reflections, and Summaries. These are our foundational skills. These are the ones that you're going to be using throughout Motivational Parent, and they're the ones that you really want to get good at. It's kind of like having your hammer, your screwdriver, and your other tools when you go in to do a job. These are going to be critical if you want to be successful at doing Motivational Parent. All right, so let's talk about our next topic, open-ended questions. So, open-ended questions versus closed questions is what we're looking at. And in fact, it's not necessarily even open-ended questions, it's open-ended inquiry. So when we go into conversations and we're trying to have a discussion, if we use closed questions, we're actually kind of controlling the conversation. We're taking more of the control. And when we're in the situations that we keep talking about, when we're trying to engage our kid, we're trying to create some behavior change, we're trying to work with them through a conflict or a difficult conversation, if I ask a lot of closed questions, it can start feeling punitive and it can cause more problems. So open-ended questions, on the other hand, they engage, and what's happening is we create an environment where we can collaborate. So that begs the question, what is an open-ended question? Well, an open-ended question always seeks more elaboration, whereas a closed question is going to get an answer of yes, no, date, time, or place. So when we're asking open-ended questions, we're creating an environment of creativity, we're creating an engagement, we're creating a collaborative relationship, we're honoring the person as an individual, which all of these things allow for conflict to start decreasing, for allowing conflict to start decreasing, to allow a great relationship with our child. It invites that. However, how you ask the question and what you ask in the question is going to make a difference. So how you ask the question, if you ask it with a lot of judgment in the question, so for example, your child gets home and you say, "Where have you been?" Right? It might be an open question, but there's a lot of judgment in it, and it's going to put the child on defense. Versus if I ask them, "Hey, 30 minutes ago was your curfew. What's going on? What happened?" Right? I'm inquiring, and I'm not judgment, which is going to open up information and allow a collaboration to happen. What we ask for is also key. So if we're trying to work through conflict, or engage the child, or work through that behavior change, if I ask open-ended questions, questions just like, "How's your day going?" It's a great open-ended question, but it doesn't move us anywhere. And when we're doing motivational parent skills, we're guiding somewhere. We're working to some type of endpoint within our conversation. So what we're asking for is going to be key. If we're trying to bring around a behavior change, then we want to be asking for the change talk. So we might ask questions like if they don't want to do their homework and are struggling to get their grades up. We might ask questions like, what do you think are the impacts if you don't do your homework? What do you think might be the consequences of not getting your grades up? Right? So we're asking questions that might elicit their thoughts, their ideas on the topic that we're talking about. We're guiding them somewhere. But again, the concept, remember the writing reflex and what ambivalence is and change talk. The more we get them to talk about the change or the reasons why they might want to engage in a behavior, the more likely they will engage. And the more that we just tell them and have a writing reflex, the more likely they're going to give us sustained talk, and the more likely they are not going to engage any change. Now, I've been working with a lot of people over the years, consulting them and helping them to develop these skills, whether it's motivational parent, motivational interviewing, or MI lead. And one thing I've noticed is when I go in and I start listening to them use the skills, normally, and they're normally surprised by this, but normally I hear a lot of closed questions. It's just natural. It's the way that we communicate. We ask lots of closed questions. It's the way we're used to speaking. So they normally are surprised by this, and then I start trying to help them tune their ear into the language that they're using. The easiest way I found this to be is what you do is you start paying attention to the beginning of the conversation. Usually, your open-ended questions are going to start with things like what, where, how, tell me, why. Why is one of those you want to be careful with because of how you use it. If you have judgment in there, it's going to shut someone down. versus if you ask with a curiosity, it can open up more inquiry and discussion and engagement. On the flip side are closed questions. They're going to start with things like have, can, would, could, are, will, when, is. Now, I've been training people in these types of concepts for many years. And it always amuses me, I'll have to admit, when someone tries to tell me that one of those words can start at the beginning of an open-ended question. And you can try to come up with one right now. And the one that I normally hear is that people will say, can you tell me about yesterday? Right? Not necessarily that question, but the beginning of it. Can you tell me? Most people think that's an open-ended question. But here's the reality. Again, if you have one of those words at the beginning of a question, it's closed. Because if you start can you, I can answer yes or no. So if we're going to ask a question and we start with one of those words, you're now asking a closed question. Why this is important? Because if you can tune your ear to start listening for those words, you're more likely to start catching your closed questions. That way you can stop, pause, and then try to turn it into an open-ended question. This normally seems pretty natural and not a big deal if we stop in a closed question and we change it to an open-ended question. So this begs the question of whether closed questions are bad. And they're not. It's just looking at effectiveness, outcomes. When we're trying to work with someone to engage them, work through behavior change, work on a conflict or difficult conversation, again, if we're asking closed questions, we'll probably be shutting the conversation down. If we're asking open-ended questions, we're collaborating and working with them. However, if I need data or other information as just a yes or no, and I'm not in those situations, closed questions are great. For example, if I need to know your birth date, I'm going to ask you a closed question. It would just be really weird if I tried to ask it to you with an open-ended question.